Okay, this morning I'm going to be looking at 8 Songs for a Mad King by Peter Maxwell Davies. I have here the Boozy and Hawks score. It's a little bit eaten by mice. It was like that when I bought it. I bought it from a university book sale. It's a 9x12 score here, and it's actually a facsimile of the composer's handwritten score. I'll show you the first page. You can see it's all painstakingly handwritten. I don't think you could engrave this piece because there are some really elaborate sections of the score, kind of like George Crumb stuff. The famous example is the birdcage movement, where the singer has to read each line like this, and then there's also a line across the top that is the flute part. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. This piece is from 1969, and it's a monodrama for baritone and Pierrot Ensemble plus percussion. And the Mad King in question is King George III. The full instrumentation for the piece is flute doubling piccolo, clarinet, piano, violin, cello. The pianist is also doubling on a harpsichord. And the percussionist there's a percussionist, it's just one player. They have glockenspiel, dulcimer, bells, crotales, wind chimes, 2 wood blocks, 2 temple blocks, tambourine, tom-tom, rototoms, side drum, that's like a big snare drum, bass drum, 2 suspended cymbals, one larger than the other, foot cymbals, tam-tam, ratchet, railway whistle, I'm assuming that's like a train whistle, chains, toy bird calls, which are like those little like water whistles, steel bars, which I guess are sort of used like brake drums, crow, I'm not sure what the crow is, and a didgeridoo. And this piece is 33 minutes long. This score in particular has a performance note on the music by Peter Maxwell Davies, a performance note on the text by Randolph Stowe, and then German translations of both, and then it has the text written out ahead of the score, and an instrumentation page, and that's all the front matter you get. Yeah, King George III struggled with mental illness, which eventually was the end of his career and his life, and he had a bird, apparently, and a miniature mechanical organ that played 8 tunes for the birds to sing, and the librettist Randolph Stowe was able to see this organ, which inspired him to think of this monodrama where the king is trying to teach his birds to perform these tunes that the organ had programmed in it. And this is sort of like the story of the Emperor's Nightingale. That was another myth that this historical artifact reminded Randolph of. And I guess it inspired him to write this piece, which is like a monologue from the perspective of George III. So for context, George III really started to struggle with his mental health around 1810, and this was at the height of his popularity as a king. And then he died of pneumonia 10 years later in 1820. So that's the sort of historical time we're talking about here. Peter Maxwell Davies has a much longer note on the music. He has so designed the piece that the king has extended dialogues with members of the ensemble individually: the flute, the cello, the clarinet, and then the violin. And the percussionist in this piece is supposed to represent the king's keeper. The piece was written for vocalist Roy Hart specifically, and a lot of extended techniques in the piece have dramatic significance and are unique to his vocal talents. And the sounds are inspired by the sounds people make under extreme duress, both physical and mental. The flute specifically is representing a bullfinch, which I'm assuming is the king's personal bird, which he's trying to teach how to sing. But it's a little bit malleable. Whenever the king is in dialogue with an instrument, that instrument is representing the bird. So you'll see at the climax of the piece, which I won't give away, it's symbolic for the king killing his pet bird and relinquishing the thing that he's holding on to for sanity. Peter Maxwell Davies was one of the founding members of this ensemble called the Pierrot Players, also known as the Fires of London. And this was a Pierrot ensemble active from the 60s through 70s in the UK. And it's one of the first serious Pierrot ensembles. Pierrot really did not take off until after Schoenberg died. And you can see in this piece that Maxwell Davies is trying to draw from Pierrot Lunaire as sort of a tradition of contemporary music. And he's doing something similar but relevant to his own culture in the UK. So it's very, very purposeful in the type of project he's taking on with this, and it has everything to do with the type of ensemble he's writing for. Okay, I think I've set this up enough. I'm going to have a listen. I'll talk about the recording after. I'll let you know my thoughts. I haven't listened to this in a couple years. The last time I listened to it was in a university performance with a student ensemble, and I think they did a pretty good job, but that was 2 years ago, and I haven't looked at the score since then, so let's get into it. I can't think of anything better to do on a Saturday morning. Alright, so the recording I ended up listening to was by the Sappho Ensemble, and I remember listening to a BBC recording years ago, but I couldn't find that same video performance. But this is a really good performance. I liked this performance. Kevin Thomas was the soloist, Kelvin Thomas. I think he did a really good job. I was not a fan of the cinematography. I felt like there was way too many close-ups and the cuts were way too frequent, and some of the editing choices were really awkward, but really good performance. I'll try to keep it short because I spent a long time introducing this one. It really plays a lot with, especially in the beginning, lining up different parts in a cutaway score, and it uses the cutaway score to shift people's entrances and have the performers play independently from one another. And I think it's a really good example of that. There's lots of sections without any bar lines, without any meter, and it really gives the performers a lot of freedom to play along with the person reciting, the singer, who is really the focus of the work. And the oscillation between atonal and tonal music becomes more and more extreme as the piece progresses. And I think that was one of the strengths of the composition, was this sort of contrast between different styles of music getting more and more extreme and pushing the drama until you get to this point where the performer is doing almost spoken word stuff and speaking as if he was already dead and doing a eulogy. And I just thought that was a really great way to end the piece. The narrative drama, it kind of just like shoves you into this world and this scenario, and then at the end sort of gives some actual like final thoughts on it. And I think that's a really great way to structure a little monodrama. So yeah, that was, again, 8 Songs for a Mad King. It's a must listen. I mean, it's like the definition of accessible new music. There's like tons of comments on this performance, and you can see that people from all walks of life, anyone who knows classical music, like, will have something to say about this piece, whether they like it or not. Okay, tomorrow we're going to be looking at a piece by Italian composer Fausto Ramatelli. This one I almost didn't include among the Pierrot pieces because there are 3 extra musicians and electronics, but I like the piece, I want to talk about it, so that's going to be the one for tomorrow. I will see you then. Hopefully there's a recording still available for that one because I really like it.